It has been a long and difficult journey to get to or closer to witnessing the very first and historic launch of the enormous Starship rocket. The CEO of SpaceX can better speak to this. Elon Musk's Starship is a brand new rocket that has yet to be seen in the entire space industry. It is said to be the successor to SpaceX's very successful rocket, the Falcon 9. This massive rocket is expected to outperform the Falcon series of rockets by taking on a variety of missions, including one that is highly anticipated by space enthusiasts, to land humans on the surface of the moon once more. It is for this reason that NASA has been closely monitoring the progress of the Starship since its inception, and it is for this reason that the Federal Aviation Administration is not willing to take anything to chance. In fact, SpaceX and the space regulatory agencies have frequently crossed paths, and the ambitious private space company has found itself on the wrong side of the agency laws several times. One such drama occurred back in 2020, when SpaceX was conducting a high-altitude Starship prototype test. Suffice it to say, it ended up noisy and messy, and the noise of its loud explosives contributed to this. The landing appears to have piqued the interest of FAA officials, who were well aware that SpaceX had violated the agency's regulations. Nonetheless, SpaceX CEO Elon Musk and his staff celebrated with shouts of excitement, declaring that the test was a success. But of all the unruly endeavors of SpaceX, the most recent one cost Musk both time and money. In August 2022, SpaceX launched its Starlink satellites to orbit as they have usually done. However, they failed to provide the Federal Aviation Administration with proper data about the launch and its potential for collision with debris in orbit. According to the Federal Aviation Administration, SpaceX was required to submit the data to the agency at least 7 days prior to the attempted launch. SpaceX was fined $175,000. Nonetheless, Elon Musk, CEO of SpaceX, recently revealed that the company will be ready to launch the Starship in a few weeks, with the launch time dependent on FAA license approval. Assuming that takes a few weeks, the first launch attempt will be near the end of the third week of April. We're probably all too familiar with Musk's optimistic promises. But on Wednesday, SpaceX's Vice President Tom Ocellaro also announced that the Starship Orbital launch is so close that we're still waiting on our FAA license, so that we can announce our launch date, but with testing mostly behind SpaceX. That license to launch may now be the biggest source of uncertainty for the Starship's orbital class debut. If SpaceX wants to avoid additional review and eventually receive an FAA license, it must guarantee that it will complete more than 75 changes to its proposal for the Starbase facility. This is primarily due to SpaceX's Starbase facility being located in a small town called Boca Chica, Texas, right on the southern tip of Texas. To launch its new Starship rocket to orbit from the site. For the last few years, SpaceX has used the site along the Rio Grande River and the US-Mexico border to build full-scale prototypes of Starship, the company's next-generation monster rocket, designed to transport people and cargo to deep space destinations, such as the Moon and Mars. SpaceX has already conducted several high-altitude test flights with Starship prototypes from Starbase. But the company now hopes to launch Starship into orbit for the first time. SpaceX requires a launch license from the FAA before launching Starship into orbit from Starbase, and the fate of SpaceX's Boca Chica facility has been in doubt for nearly 2 years. While the FAA conducts an environmental review of how the company's launch operations will impact the surrounding area. Initially, SpaceX had no plans to launch its future Moon and Mars rocket from Texas. Indeed, the company's first piece of land in Boca Chica, purchased in 2012, was intended to be a commercial launch site for its smaller Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy rockets, with the goal of launching up to 12 times per year from this serene location. The FAA completed a thorough environmental study of the proposed launch site in 2014. To make sure that SpaceX's plans complied with environmental rules, and were away from the hustle and bustle of its much busier launch facilities in Cape Canaveral, Florida. Despite the original plan, the agency published an environmental impact statement that detailed how the smaller launches would affect the area. SpaceX eventually decided to launch its future Moon and Mars rockets from Boca Chica. After realizing that the site's remote location and proximity to the Gulf of Mexico made it an ideal location for testing and launching Starship spacecraft, which can take many months, if not years, to complete. As it necessitates interviews with experts, scientists, business officials, and residents, as well as rigorous analysis and research into how a proposed action will affect the nearby human environment. However, SpaceX's plans have shifted significantly since the original was published. Beginning in 2018, the company significantly increased production activities in Boca Chica, after deciding to devote the South Texas facility solely to the production of Starship prototypes. The more modest commercial launch facility that SpaceX once envisioned has evolved into a thriving installation, filled with massive warehouses, intense construction, and thousands of employees working around the clock. As SpaceX's presence in the area grew, the company began conducting high-altitude flight tests with its Starship prototypes, launching the vehicles up to heights of 30 to 40,000 feet, before attempting to land them back on Earth. The majority of these tests ended in fiery explosions, with only one successfully sticking its tongue out. One prototype blew up just before it was supposed to land in March of 2021. The test flights, combined with ongoing construction and ground testing, have led to growing tensions with the nearby community. The starbase is located next to a small neighborhood of a couple dozen homes called Boca Chica Village, which is only really accessible via one lone state highway that connects the starbase. During tests and other demonstrations, that road is frequently closed, limiting access to both the village and the nearby area. Beach residents also complained about disruptions to their daily lives, as they were frequently asked to leave their homes during major tests. Many Boca Chica Village residents have sold their properties to SpaceX. Despite the fact that some residents have remained in their homes, the FAA announced in late 2020 that it would conduct an environmental review of SpaceX's plans to launch Starship into orbit from Starbase. The FAA released a draft Programmatic Environmental Assessment, or P, in September 2021, outlining SpaceX's updated plans for the area. The document revealed that during the ongoing development of Starship, SpaceX plans to conduct up to 20 suborbital launches of Starship per year. The company also plans to conduct up to 5 orbital, or suborbital launches with Starship per year, sending the vehicle to high altitudes, or into space but not into orbit before attempting to land it back on Earth. During these launches, the Super Heavy booster would attempt to land back on Earth, either at a landing pad or a platform in the nearby Gulf of Mexico, on top of the massive rocket that SpaceX is also developing to give Starship the extra thrust it needs to achieve orbit. Finally, SpaceX estimated that it would need to close access to the state highway for 500 hours per year for normal operations, and an additional 300 hours per year for anomalies, and things would undoubtedly change as SpaceX progressed in its development. SpaceX predicted that the number of orbital launches would increase over time, while suborbital flights would decline after the disruption. Other major additions to SpaceX's plans include the development of a natural gas pre-treatment system to purify methane for use in the Starship rocket, as well as the construction of a pipeline to transport gas to the plant. According to the FAA's decision released today, SpaceX has since scrapped its plans for a natural gas pre-treatment system, a power plant, and a desalination plant. The company has also modified the capabilities of its Raptor engine, which is used to propel Starship as a result of these changes. As part of its environmental review, the FAA held a comments period for SpaceX's proposed plans, which drew both intense criticism and support from members of the public. Many critics demanded that the FAA conduct a new ICE, as the one conducted in 2014 was no longer adequate, based on SpaceX's proposed plans.